So most of you I've met before, but not everybody. Okay, so my name's Tom McGuire, and I've run quite a few of these sessions over the last couple of years, and I like doing them. I get quite a lot of fun out of it, and I like explaining things to people. And if you try and explain anything to anybody, you've got to think about it a lot yourself first. So I find that helps me. Welcome, Claire. We're just going to make a start now. So I've got some objectives. Understand and recognize chunking when you see it. Okay, so this is all about chunking in NLP. Now, it's a terrible title, and it's enough to put you off the word chunking, but I'll go through and we'll see what it means. So you're going to see a little video clip from a newscast, which uses chunking. They don't say that, but that's what's going on in the background. So recognize it when you see it. Know your own chunk style, so you can build rapport by switching as needed. Well, we don't know what chunking is yet, but we'll come to it. But if you understand chunking and you have the ability to work at different levels in chunking, it can help build rapport with people, both on a one-to-one basis with groups and also in your written materials. Understand how to move up and down and across chunk levels so you can drive your message. Okay, so people who can only work at one chunk level, and again, I'll talk about exactly what chunking is in a moment, tend to be a bit stuck. They'll do okay talking to some people, and they'll fail dismally with others, and they don't know why. So we can use these different levels. It's a real help. Build rapport by using the same chunk level. Okay, so I'll talk about that in a moment. Some people are just naturally good at this. Other people have to practice. And lead people up or down the chunk levels. So we'll talk about what chunk levels are. And there's a concept in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I'll talk about it in a moment. But leading people. And one of the things that you're meant to do is to kind of pace them first a number of times. So the idea is you work at their level and then you lead them to another level. Okay, so we'll talk about where we could lead them and why. And also, let's have a look at the 5 things that we can immediately do to improve our training and comms. So I'm going to try and make it specific about things that we can actually do. There's a picture of my mum here. Now, if you've done some of my other courses, I think I've mentioned her once on another course, and I like to put this picture up. I took it, it's a nice picture. And but there is a purpose behind it. When I first did my NLP training, and I was taught the concept of chunking, it was a real eye-opener for me. And one of the reasons was I'd always got on well with my mum, but we always kind of struggled to maintain a useful, deep conversation. And the reason was, it was that we were working at different chunk levels. I'm personally a big chunk guy, and it's not to do with being fat or, you know, what size I am. It's to do with how I process information. And my mum is a very small chunk level. So when I would meet with her and we'd talk, she would be using a lot of chit chat, a lot of detail, telling me about her neighbours. And I wasn't. I was always working on a much bigger chunk level. You know, I was interested in how I felt that day, you know, and what was going on. So when I did my NLP training, I found out that I work at a very big chunk level, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just an observation. My mum works at a different level. Now, what I did do when I went back to see her was to pace her for quite a while and actually talk to her at her own chunk level. And it was a very, very different experience. We had much better rapport. I found out a lot of things that I didn't know because I asked questions. I wanted to find out, I was interested. And it was a very different experience. So that's the very first time I got introduced to the idea of chunking. Anybody guess which movie this might be from, this little picture of the blue and red pill?
The Matrix.
The Matrix, absolutely tomorrow. Yeah. Now there's something I think if you do NLP training, you need to be aware of, that once something's explained to you and you've got it, you can't unlearn it. You might get a bit rusty, slightly forget it, but if you go back to it, it'll come back straight away. So when we go through chunking and I explain it, it's the kind of thing you can't unlearn. Once you know it, that's it, you've got it. And I always kind of bring up this picture when I try and explain things like this, because you're on the course, it's not dangerous, but it's something you can't forget. So I'm going to encourage you to use your chunking goggles as we go through this session. I want you to kind of slip them on metaphorically and start thinking and looking and listening and trying to work out what's going on with chunking, what is it, can I recognize it and actually see it. And if you look carefully with this course, you'll actually find that there is a course within a course within a course. There are kind of unconscious levels to the way I've built this course. If you were really, really interested, you'd play the video back and see if you can work out where they are. Okay, now just wanted to tell you that it's only fair, isn't it? It's like a really good magician who tells you that he's a complete fake and it's all shim sham right at the beginning. So, a few things I wanted to say about what you already know. So you can remember being overwhelmed with detail when someone's trying to explain something to you. You get exhausted listening to them. Perhaps some of you have done some NLP training before. I'll talk about what it is in a moment. Have you ever presented information and it just landed perfectly? Do you somehow get on with certain people immediately? You're not really quite sure why, but it just seems to work. And have you ever got frustrated when you're trying to explain something to somebody and it's just not hitting the mark? Have you ever been disappointed when you've attended some training and it's just been too fluffy? There was no substance to it. These might be all experiences that we've had. Okay, I've noticed 2 or 3 more people have joined in, I think Claire and Fiona, so thank you. Just wanted to give you a quick heads up on where people are from. So we've got people from Leeds Building Society, Aviva, Fujitsu, quite a few other organisations. I think the furthest one away is New Zealand. Yeah, so welcome to everybody. And I've mentioned this word NLP, but I've not explained what it is. So NLP was designed in the kind of 70s. It's an American thing. And it was a couple of guys got together and they wanted to pick out the best elements of psychology, sociology, loads of different things that they were studying and try and refine them down to very simple concepts that most people can understand. So NLP is the practice of understanding how people organize their thinking, feeling, and language and behavior to get the results they do. So chunking is a very, very tiny little sliver of NLP. And I want to focus on just this one thing. Originally, when I designed this event, I was going to cover about 3 different things, but it became really clear quickly that was just not going to be possible. And to actually do it justice. There's a little picture of a church here because there is another concept, the Church of NLP, and you'll have people who will tell me off for doing things in the wrong sequence. Anthony is an NLP practitioner. He may be biting his tongue now, who knows, but I'm going to ignore that completely. Okay, we're just going to jump straight in and we're going to have a look at chunking. And I'm going to give you some pointers about where you can get information around NLP, some of the things that you might do as a precursor to this, but I wanted to dive straight in. So chunking is a metaprogram. You'll see this expression in NLP a lot, and I'll try not to use too much jargon. If I use a word that you might not recognize, I'll try and give a definition of it. If I miss one, tell me, but I'll explain what a metaprogram is in a moment. But chunking, big chunk equals big picture. I'm a big picture guy. If you meet me in the street and say, you know, how are you? I'll probably say, I'm terrific. Now, to me, that gives you as much detail as you need. To other people, they find that completely frustrating. They want to know where I've been on holiday, what I'm doing, exactly what's going on, who I met yesterday, and that would be a small chunk person. So a metaprogram is an internal pattern that we help, that helps us determine how we form our internal representations, and that affects our behavior. So we've all got these metaprograms, little bits of software in our heads, and they control how we kind of respond to things. And that's why different people respond in different ways. So little chunk equals details. So other people will like small chunks of information. Now I'd like to think I could do both. And I probably can sometimes, but not all the time. And in NLP, one of the things they try and encourage you to do is to build your flexibility in looking at metaprograms and being able to run different metaprograms in different ways. Chunking is one of them. So chunking is a way of creating a hierarchy or an abstract way of communicating something. So for instance, transport is a very high level hierarchy. If I drill down into it, we might, refine that down to being a train. If I keep going, we might refine it down to being one train. So that's where I'm drilling down the chunk levels. If we look at chunking up, we could start with an Airbus 319, which is an aircraft. And if I keep chunking up, that becomes transport. So chunking direction, you'll hear this concept of chunking up and down, and we're going to see some examples of that coming up. So when you're chunking down, you're looking for more specific details. You've also got more chances for correction as well. If you drill into something in detail, you've got more information where you could find things that are different, that are the same, might help you make some choices. If we look at chunking up, whoops, sorry, just lost my mouse there for a moment. Just go back. Yeah, if I look at chunking up, whoops. Yeah, more abstract language, more chances for agreement. So that the higher the level we go in chunking, you're getting less and less direct specific information. So we're looking more at feelings and themes about what's actually going on. You can see this in the media. If we look at the BBC News, we get headlines right at the beginning. They're big chunks. We get stories in the middle, which are small chunk, followed by a big chunk at the end. So if I just play you just a short track, hopefully the noise will come out.
Hello, I'm Steve Saul. Welcome to Northwest. Today, the headlines this Friday lunchtime. How the Royal Preston Hospital is coping with COVID and winter pressures. It's planning for the future. It's an insurance policy. If we don't use it, I will be successful and we will not have to go into it. But it's there if necessary. The Minister says more help could be on the way for companies hit by Greater Manchester's clean air charges. As Greater Manchester's hospitals ask the Army for help, work's continuing at the Royal Preston Hospital to create a surge hub for the whole region.
Okay, so that was just a little video. So humans naturally do this anyway. The way we consume information like news, big chunks at the beginning, we get a summary of the news, then we get the detail, and you'll actually get a summary at the end. You'll get another big chunk at the end there. So do you think this statement is a big chunk or small chunk? What kind of person would say that?
Big chunk?
Small
yeah,
chunk?
I would say big chunk. Don't bother me with the details. They're a big chunk person. They don't like it. What's happening in the background to make this work?
That's a small chunk person.
Absolutely. They're drilling down at the chunk levels to get more information. How do I break out the tax from the total cost?
Small chunk.
Yeah, small chunk. So what I want you to do is just, start to have a look at some of these words and statements, and just see if you can, with your goggles on, your chunking goggles, are these big or small? So, but I need to know that's a kind of a small chunk person. They're frustrated because they're not getting the detail that they need. That all looks good to me. That's kind of a big chunk statement if you hear someone saying that. Just give me the answer, big chunk. They don't want the detail, they just want to know what the answer is. So I don't know if you noticed it, but I sent out an email about a week or so ago asking people to fill in a survey. And I had some questions in there that probably seemed rather odd at the time, like, how are you feeling right now, this moment? And these are some of the answers that I got back. So what about okay, big chunk or small chunk?
Big chunk.
Yeah, and good, lots of level, good level of energy, looking forward to the weekend. Probably small chunk.
Small chunk.
Yeah, it's giving us a bit more information. Okay, if I keep going, what's the best holiday you ever had? These are some of the answers that I got back. So there's a small chunk. 6 weeks in Jamaica, chilling with family, swimming, running and golfing. Okay, a free one, big chunk. So we can see a distinct difference in the types of answers. If I just whiz through some of these, let's see, how did you choose that holiday? Again, we've got detail there, word of mouth, kids in mind. These are big chunk answers. How do you make a cup of tea? Well, there's a big difference, okay? Big chunk, and then we've got small chunk. I think, let's see, is Tamara's on here? Yeah, I think that was Tamara. I don't drink tea. I think it was you. Yeah. So these are just answers that I got back, and this gives me a clue. So if you ever see if you've got a pet dog or a friend's got a dog, and they hear something outside the house, you can't hear it, but you can hear their ear moving, and they twist their head, and their ear is cocked up. You can do the same thing when you're listening to how people talk. So I asked about classical music. Okay, and again, we got a mixture of kind of big chunk and small chunk answers. So people are doing this without thinking. Now, anybody guess, is this big chunk or small chunk?
Big chunk.
Yeah, that's about one of the biggest chunks you're ever going to see in media. Get Brexit done. How? What is Brexit? They're small chunk questions. Okay, so there's a political leader who uses big chunk in his communications. What about this? Are these big chunk or small chunk statements?
I think they're somewhere in the middle. They're in the middle.
Yeah, they could be. He's kind of broken one thing down into three, so you could argue it either way, really. But save lives, it doesn't say whose lives or what lives they are or how it's going to be done. So possibly big chunk. How about this, big or small?
Oh, small.
Yeah. I mean, it's horrible detail. I can't even imagine what that's trying to tell me, but it's small chunk detail. So we're bombarded with information, whether it's the media or things that we're reading. So if you can work out what your style is, then you can actually influence how you were thinking and how you're behaving. Now, if you go back to my mum, for instance, I always found our conversations very trivial, but once I started pacing her at her chunk level and then kind of leading it slightly up towards me, I was getting some fantastic information about her childhood that I would never have got, and our relationship improved because of it. So I've got some statements here about different types of people. They're very general. So if you identify with one of these, don't get annoyed with me. They're just generalizations, but people who think globally get bored with details. People who respond to small chunks get frustrated with overviews and summaries. So we've got a kind of a scale here. Some people are at the big picture end. Some people are specific. If you want keywords for this, this would be kind of inductive reasoning, and we've got deductive. And we're all somewhere along that spectrum. Where it can become very useful to understand this is when you can actually move yourself, along that spectrum. So if we look at the word inductive, using a particular set of facts or ideas to give a general principle, and deductive, we're asking questions to refine something down and down and down until we can get a specific answer. So big chunk people, they like an overview first, they talk in generalities and get frustrated by detailed information. Once they've got the whole picture, they can make connections and they jump from place to place. And that's like seeing the world through a wide angle lens. Sometimes they say yes before they think things through. I think I'm guilty of that sometimes. Their ideas are sometimes considered unrealistic. But if we didn't have big picture people, who had great big ideas, we'd probably never get anything started. Small chunk people get excited by details, lists of information, and specific steps. Get bored with vagueness, generalities, and fluff. They draw conclusions based on small pieces of information that are examples. And it's like looking at the world through a microscope. They can laser in and focus in on one thing at a time. So why is that important? Well, if you want to be a good communicator, you need to know your own metaprogram preferences. And if you understand your own preference, you then understand that other people might have different ones. And you can translate your training, your comms, your written materials to work at a different metaprogram level. Flexibility in seeing the big picture and the details can influence how successful you are. Now, sometimes you meet people who are scientists and they've spent the last 30 years researching one particular thing. They're small chunk people, and you need people like that, and they're going to be successful at what they do. You've got big chunk people, and as a culture, we tend to pick leaders who have got a big vision. Now, whether that vision actually comes to anything is another thing that you could argue, but that's how our culture tends to pick its leaders. Considering how to communicate across different chunk levels can make a bigger impact. I think this is definitely true. So I have got a little kind of task that I want someone to do. So this is Anthony and Simon, and I've just sent a text message to Anthony with a key word in it. Now, Anthony, has it come through?
Yeah.
Okay, now all I want you to do is use that name of an object, and I want you to describe it to Simon. And Simon, I want to see if you can work out what it is, so you can ask Anthony questions. And everybody else, put your kind of chunking goggles on and try and work out what's going on. Now, I've not spoken to either of them about this in advance, apart from asking them to be involved. This could go really badly, could go really well. Let's just see what happens. Okay, so Anthony, Simon, take yourself off mute and fire away.
Okay, Anthony. Is it a tech item?
I'm not sure whether it's a place or an item.
You're not sure whether it's a place or an item.
I'm going to say it's an item. Yeah.
It's an item. Okay. Okay, fine. Is it an item that I would need at work? Is it an item I would use at work, like a computer? Is it a desk, a chair, something like that?
It depends on what your profession is, and
Anthony, dive in and do a description of it without giving the name away.
Right, okay. I really can't give a description of it, Tom, because I really don't know what it is.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah, so I've heard. Right, okay, yeah, okay. Right, it's something that you would use for leisure or for work.
Oh, okay, for leisure or work. So would it be useful for carrying things?
It depends. Yes, it would, but you're quite limited at what you could carry.
So you could use it for work or leisure, and you could use it for carrying. Is it an item of clothing? Would I wear this object, this thing?
No, you definitely wouldn't wear it. You definitely wouldn't wear it. And apologise, I've just got the ambulances in the background. I'm in Leeds city centre at my flat. So.
Right, so you wouldn't wear it, but you might use it to carry things. And would you hold it in your hand? Is it like a briefcase? Is it like that?
No, definitely not. And it could carry, it can carry not just objects.
What other kinds of things can it carry then, please?
It can carry human beings, dogs, animals, but yeah.
Okay, so is it a vehicle of some kind?
It is.
And is it so it's a vehicle of some kind, and does it have, how many wheels does this vehicle have?
It has 3.
So is it a tricycle?
It's, yeah, you're getting there. It's
okay. So it sounds like it's a 3-wheeler vehicle.
Yeah.
It can carry people, convey people. Could I use it to go to the shops? Would it be helpful? It's not a Robin Reliant, is it? Or Delboy car or something like that?
It's not far off one of those, if I'm honest with you, Simon.
Okay.
Yes, you can use it to go shopping, yeah.
And finally, would I sit inside it in order to operate it?
In order to operate it, you wouldn't be sitting inside it, you would be on it.
I'd be on it. So it's got 3 wheels. I'd be on it. Would I? It feels like there's an object. It can convey me. Does it have pedals?
It does, yes.
So it sounds to me like it's a 3-wheeler tricycle or trike.
Yes, you are right, but there is a more definitive name for it.
I tell you what, I'll stop you there. You're doing great. You're almost there. Now, I'll put you out of your misery. It's a rickshaw. So that's what the object was. Now, did you notice with your chunking goggles on that Simon, trying to guess, was doing lots of drilling down? He was working down the chunk levels. You know, is it this? Is it that? And he was always going lower. And Anthony was probably going up the chunk levels, you know, and he could have given a big clue like it's a bit like a bicycle, you know, and that would be going up a level. Do you remember we were looking at transport earlier? So people naturally do this. When you're trying to find something out, you're drilling down through the chunk levels without even realizing it. And that's just how humans kind of operate. And if you're trying to explain something, typically you'll chunk up to a higher level to explain roughly what's going on and then drill down into the detail. So thank you both for doing that. That was really kind.
I thought it was a place, Tom, if I'm honest.
I
There's a place called that
that.
down here, so thank you.
Okay, so how can we use it? So plan your training or comms to satisfy big and small chunk where possible. Okay, so if you're doing a comms piece and you're writing out to people and you do a very dense email with lots and lots of detail, first of all, they won't read it. They'll just see it and think, oh God, and press delete and it's gone. But you're just failing to get your message across. Respond to big or small chunk questions at the same level. So if you're in a classroom or you're running an event or you're doing a presentation, really, have your ears pricked up and your kind of chunking goggles on to work out what chunk level is that person asking that question at. And if you know that, then you respond at the same level. Now, you may well then drive up or down, but to build rapport with that person and to get them to feel they're getting the answer, work at the same level. Know your own style and practice the weak side. Observe successful people and model them, and anticipate issues and acknowledge them and then chunk up. So there's something here about if you're doing comms about a change and people are not going to like it, it's really good to anticipate the issues, acknowledge them, so you're working at a lower level, and then chunk up to the solution. Consider chunking up and down, whatever's appropriate to get the message across. And we're going to come back to lateral chunking in a moment. Now, I wanted to introduce a colleague of mine, Will James. He's just got 5 minutes just to go through some information about chunking in organizations. I've worked with Will at Aviva, the client I'm currently working with. So I've stolen this from his LinkedIn profile, but I'll let him introduce himself and I'll move the slides for him. So over to you, Will.
An embarrassment. Thank you, Tom. I've got to rattle through this, but I just thought I'd kind of look at some chunking in practice. And it's from a finance viewpoint, but I span the whole organization usually. So, and these are basic points, but sometimes we forget that somebody with a marketing background has got a different set of interests to someone in finance or senior exec. Although we have to be careful we don't sort of overgeneralize, because someone on the exec might have been in production or IT or something, but they just tend to bring a particular viewpoint on things. And again, the point Tom made about matching the level when you reply, actually talking, if not in their language, at least what it means for them, how it might help them. It's part of a kind of sales process to get them to think, yeah, that's a good idea, or that's something we should do. Third bullet is kind of getting into a little bit of chunking. So does it work financially? What would it do to our margin? Is it a target customer base? The kind of things that people might be asking and might want to be satisfied. And we've probably all come across bosses who actually just see if you've thought it through by drilling down, i.e. asking an awkward question about something on page 56, or really making sure that you've actually done your homework. So just be ready for those. Fourth one about kind of explaining what it means for people. So P2P, if you don't know, is kind of purchase orders and the way we buy things. And in communicating that over the years, I've tended to do a slide about what it means for people who are buying or ordering stuff, what it means for suppliers, what it means for accounts payable. Just to sort of explain it to them and what change they'll see as they go from the current state, the as is, to the future. And it just helps to actually show them the good stuff, be honest about if there's some training or learning, in which case get in touch with Tom. And again, just as part of the credibility, I've put assess capacity. But it's really chunking, it's part of being honest. So you can say, this is really important to do. It mitigates a risk. It damages a competitor. But in order to do that, we need to free up resource, so do something else later, not do it as well. You know, I think chunking is just about bringing those conversations alive so that people can manage trade-offs and value judgments and all those kind of things. And the one big thing is coming back to the tribes at the top. At the bottom there, I've got unintended consequences. And quite often we do strange things, particularly in large organizations. So we've maybe got, making this up, HR are trying to actually do all sorts of things about morale and making people feel loved and valued. Meanwhile, IT are banging out some tool which everyone hates, that makes people do some self-service they don't want to do, that actually really, really irritates people and has everyone muttering. Used to be in the corridor, but probably kind of mutter on chat or something now. So we just need to think those things through kind of when chunking. And I love this bit. I was going to say next slide, but Tom beat me to it. So coming to the top there, I'm doing it from a financial point of view, but I'm sure there are similar things in other functions about whether it makes sense. So I've said, does it fit margin? Does it fit norms? Someone in HR might think, is it part of our kind of employee proposition? Is it going to actually fly well with retaining staff or whatever? And again, I'm doing this financially, but there are other examples. So the second point there, have we considered sort of all the marginal costs? Have we thought through other things that would need to be done? So related costs, cross-selling opportunities, etc. The third one I probably have done in bold or something. I think it can be a really important part of chunking is to test something. So in IT terms, it's often called a proof of concept, but in marketing, it could be testing in one market or one demographic or something, or just trying something out as part of chunking to make sure that it's going to work. Not really chunking, but the overlapping change point is in that sometimes we get kind of blinkered, we get focused, we don't kind of think that we're actually approaching the same people to do something at the same time as there's a lot of compulsory IT security webinars going out, at the same time as HR want the annual returns done, at the same time as something else. So it's kind of planning if it's going to impact people in the same time frame or the same systems. So that's kind of chunking down and so on. Towards the end, I've got end-to-end processes. So large organizations pass things, and probably small as well, pass things from one location to another, from one part of a team to another, between teams. And if we kind of don't actually join it all up, we can get something really good over here, but it causes indigestion or some kind of problem down there. We might be dependent on people outside the organization. So as part of the evaluating, part of the chunking, you need to do that. And the last one, you can't always overdo this, but sometimes it helps people to translate something into what it really means. So when I used to work for, not Aviva that Tom and I are talking about with an E, but Aviva, the insurance company, and people in Norwich that were working for me wanted to go up to Perth for a day. And the cost of that, not just the flight, but all the parking and so on and so forth, was quite enormous. And it was at the time when we used to do conference calls, didn't really do this kind of call. And they were really kind of pushing the need to do it. So I said, fine, but actually let's look at it the other way. If we do that, we incur a cost to the profit. We reduce our profit to the shareholders. It was about, I don't know, 350 quid. That's the margin we make on selling 3 motor insurance policies. So one of your colleagues over in the contact center is going to make 3 sales just so we kind of break even on that deal. I know it's simplistic and I know it's kind of could be patronizing, but just kind of bring it to life for people. And then, yeah, you click forward, Tom. There's one here from, so I'm a fellow of CMO, I do a lot of work with them. There's something I came across, which is about powerful presentation and how to deliver. But actually, if you look towards the bottom, the 6 points, it's exactly the same as Tom's been talking about. It's about chunking. So it's knowing your audience, that point that sometimes people have got a different attention span, they've got a different interest in the level of detail. If you're presenting, and I'm learned this over the years, a perfectionist, but I tend to try and do something that's good enough so I can get home on a night, or I'm already home, but get away from the desk. Grabbing attention. Someone I worked with years ago was totally predictable, controversial, would just say something provocative, but people remembered it. It's the telling the story, using the pictures as Tom's been doing, and that sort of simplify, but watch out for the important guy in the corner of the room who's actually a reflector, who likes to know the detail. There's a link right at the end, which is the full report, which brings it to life. And I think some of the things in there could be borrowed to complement what we've talked about tonight. That's me done, Tom. And I think you're on mute, Tom, as the saying goes.
Ah, there we go. Thanks very much. Thanks, Will. Okay, so let's have a look at questions that can drive chunking. So if I want to chunk upper level, you could ask things like, what is this an example of? For what purpose? What's your intention? What's important to you? What we're doing is moving up a kind of a logical level by asking that type of question. If you want to chunk down, what are examples of this? What specifically? How specific? How do you know that? What evidence have you got? So again, you know, listen out, use your goggles to kind of see these statements, listen out for them, and you can see where someone's going. Are they trying to drive me, you know, down the chunks, or are they trying to move me up the chunks when you're interacting with them? I also mentioned lateral chunking earlier. So if you think about, you start off at a low chunk level, and if you were moving laterally, you're moving across rather than up and down. But what I'm going to suggest, I've got a few examples of this, is that you start low, you move up, you move across, and you move down. Now, why would you ever want to do it? I'll talk through the steps and then I'll give you an example. So chunk down, chunk up, and then chunk down again. Okay, so we ask for, or we present a different example. So here's a very trivial example. My son is 11 years old and he tells me I want an Apple Watch 7. Okay, my Apple Watch is great for displaying messages. Okay, so I've drilled down to talk about Apple Watches because that's what he's interested in. Why do you want it? Now that's me chunking up. Okay, so I've gone beyond the watch itself. I'm looking at the purpose of the watch, and he then tells me to tell the time and look cool. Okay, so how about an Apple Watch 4? I don't want to spend all that money on an Apple Watch 7. So what I've done is I've kind of acknowledged what he's told me, you know, at the same level. I've gone up a level, why do you want it? And then we've drilled down to somewhere else, same level, but a different place. Okay, another example is him again. I got in trouble for being noisy at school. Me, being noisy with Carl and Jensen can be fun. Okay, there is two friends. What were you trying to achieve? Okay, so I've acknowledged him at his level, but we've gone up a chunk level. Then he tells me, so the other kids noticed me. Okay, so he's chunked down. So that's, you know, why. And then I chunk down. How about winning a prize for your studies so you get noticed? Okay, so we're satisfying this higher level, this higher chunk level of what he was trying to do, which is to get noticed, but I'm giving it to him in a different way. Now, this is a key concept in NLP called reframing. And you'll see it used on virtually every metaprogram, and there are dozens of metaprograms. And if you get into the habit of thinking like this, in this case, it's chunking, but there are lots of other metaprograms to investigate, you get very quick at kind of noticing a problem, acknowledging it, moving up to see, you know, why the problem's there. What's the underlying purpose behind that person being upset or not performing well or whatever? And then we lateral chunk across and we move down. I think I've got another example. Yeah, so chunk down, acknowledge the current issue. Chunk up, tell them or ask them about the benefit of the, you know, new system solution, whatever it might be. Chunk down, show them the features of that system or solution. So I've generally got things like systems in my mind because that's what I do for a living. I do systems training, but it doesn't necessarily have to be systems. It could be how someone's feeling about something. You know, we kind of acknowledge where they're at, move up a level, work out why they're upset or whatever's going wrong, and then chunk down to a solution. If you jump straight to the solution without doing this lateral chunking, you've lost them. They're still stuck at that problem level. Okay, so I've got a scenario here which is definitely true in many of the organizations I've worked in. Like I say, I'm a software trainer, so procurement has gone live. This is how you buy things, you know, a bit like going on Amazon, but companies have their own versions of it. People are still buying without a purchase order, so invoices are not getting paid. So there's a behavioral change that hasn't happened in the organization. We want them to use the new system and they're not doing it. How do we use lateral chunking to get the message across? Well, chunk down, acknowledge the current situation. Current situation is suppliers are ringing up complaining they've not been paid. Okay, and this is partly because of the behavior of parts of the organization not following instructions. Chunk up, tell them about the big plan and why we need to keep the suppliers happy. Okay, we're trying to reduce costs. You know, we're trying to streamline everything, cut out paperwork, cut out call centers. We want everything automated. Chunk down, tell them how to use the new system correctly. Okay, if you just send a comms message out, or you just train people on how to press the right sequence of buttons to produce a purchase requisition, they still won't do it because they're not interested. You know, there's no benefit to them. Using lateral chunking, we're acknowledging where they're at, we're going up a level, moving across, and then chunking down. Another scenario, your company buys another company and you transfer your staff to, or you transfer the staff to the new legal entity. People are still using old systems because they've still got access to them. Okay, we don't want that. So how do we use lateral chunking to get the message across? So we acknowledge the move has been difficult and they are used to using their old systems. We chunk up, tell them about the benefits of having one system that we want them to use. And we chunk down and we show them how to use the new system and maybe what's better about it. You know, what are the cool features? Okay, so starting low, go high, move across, and then down. So how to chunk your information. Okay, so this is just kind of the way I sometimes like to present things. We've got why, what, and how. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the top right-hand corner of all of the slides, I've got a little icon that gives you a visual clue about whether we're doing why, what, or how per slide. Okay, so this is a what slide. So why typically comes first. This is big chunk. We're explaining why we're doing something. Keep it short, make it clear. Don't be clever or cute with what you're trying to tell them, just be clear with it. Sell the big picture on the wall, not the hammer and the nail. Okay, so we're not giving them detail of how you get the picture on the wall to make it look nice. We just want them to admire the picture. Personal stories can really help. So I told you about my mum and our relationship and how our conversations are better now. Be clear about what you're going to present and why it's important. And at the end, always point towards the what section. Okay, so the what section is small chunk. the meat of your message and the training. You need to go through step by step through each topic. Break up the what into reasonable some things. Now, if I was writing a book, it would be chapters in the book. If I was writing a classroom course, I would be breaking it up into probably sessions that are 30, 40 minutes, no longer, because people aren't able to concentrate for much longer than that. So make sure you split things up. Start from the beginning and work to the end. Sounds really obvious, but if you jump around, you're going to lose people. Don't neglect the first topic or step. You might make assumptions, you've lost them right from the beginning. Take the temperature of your average consumer. If you assume they know something and they don't, explain it. You know, you've lost it. You've lost them if you don't explain things as you go. Include common obstacles and mention contrary opinions that might disagree with what you're telling them. Okay, that's being honest, I think, in your communications. You know, people are grumbling about the new system. They can't bear it. It's not as good as the old system. You know, you should acknowledge that as an obstacle and then deal with it. Tips for the how. Okay, so this is the last kind of bit. This is big chunk. Summarize your major points. So this again applies to communications, applies to training, applies to conversations you have with people. Offer resources. Okay, give them extra things that they can reflect on afterwards. Will made a very good example of that. He's got a link. It's in this PowerPoint. I'll give you a copy that gives you much more information about his 6 major steps. Suggest big things to avoid. I think it's okay to mention things to avoid. It might sound negative, but it isn't. It's going to save people time, and it also convinces people that you know what you're talking about as well. Provide simple action steps that they can do right now. Okay, so I've got some action steps for you right now. Identify your own chunking style. Okay, so how do you do that? Okay, how do you identify your own chunking style? Well, listen, you know, to this session, and there will be certain statements that popped up, you know, that were responses to the questions that I sent out about holidays and music and whatever, and you'll instantly, you know, feel comfortable with some of them, and you won't with others. Think about, am I big chunk, small chunk, and have conversations with people. Choose someone with a different chunk style and engage them in conversation. Now, this can go well, it can go badly. If you're the same chunk style, you'll probably get along great, no problem. If you choose someone with a different style, try and engage with them. Work at their chunk level, which might be really difficult for you, but you're building the flexibility to keep doing that. And the more flexibility you've got, the better that's going to be. So chunk at their level and know how it feels. Okay, you're expanding your own metaprogram around chunking, you know, if you can do that. Email me and let me know the story. Okay, when you have conversations with people, if you think of it, tell me, you know, how that went and what happened. You can also, I've not got a bullet point for it, but you can practice buzzing people by doing the wrong chunking level. So you have a conversation with them, they're big chunk, and you go massively small chunk, and you break rapport with them, and it's really, really difficult. I wouldn't do that too often, you know, but it's an interesting exercise to do to see how frustrated they get. Review a document with your chunking goggles on and look for the why, the what, and the how. When I write training material now, I kind of have this frame when I write it. I think about the why at the beginning, you know, big chunk, explain why we're doing it, personal stories, make it relevant. The what, I try not to exclude anything if it's a sequence of steps, and I'll explain new words, or they might be new to them, and try and do that as I go. And the how, I will give them things that they can do immediately after the training or after the document. If this is an email comms that you're sending out to people and you're asking them to do something, you know, tell them why, tell them what you want them to do, and then tell them how they can do it. Okay, so These are key things that you could try. Review this course and see if you can see a course within a course within a course. Okay, so Anthony, if you've had an NLP training, you probably get the idea of what I mean. So we've been doing reframing this whole hour, you know, but I didn't mention reframing until really near the end. And we're just about done. Gosh, I'm actually 4 minutes early, which for me is unheard of on these events. Normally, I'm desperately trying to fit everything in. I hope that's been useful to you. This is a slide from Will with the 6 rules. It kind of breaks it out into text. I've got it across 3 slides. I've also got a link as well, a hyperlink, if you wanted to read the full document that Will gave me. So that's something you could go to. There is a guy called Robert Dilts who's who I've met a few times. He's an NLP trainer from the States, and very famous guy if you're in the NLP world. And he's given a massive amount of information away. He's written a great big encyclopedia, and he's scanned every page and he's put it on the website for free. Now, what you can't do, because they're images, you can't scrape the text off the page, so but you can actually read it perfectly well. That's a really interesting resource. Ganya's 9 Steps, another kind of training hero of mine. I try and use some of his principles. He used to train, I think, Air Force pilots up in the, was it the Second World War? I think so. And he actually reduced the number of them dying because he trained them properly. Now, he wasn't a pilot himself, but he designed a training methodology. Really, really interesting. So there's a few things for you to do after today. I'm just going to go back to action steps. Two most important things: know your own style and interact with someone who is a different style. It's really fascinating. And if you don't cue them up so they don't know what's going on, they might think, oh, hang on a minute, this is a very different conversation. I'm not used to talking like this with this person. You know, what's going on? And it can throw them a little bit. And then just see if you can go along at that same chunking level. Have a think about the lateral chunking when it comes to doing comms and training and dealing with questions. It might sound slightly complicated now, and you'd have to think about it each time you did it. It actually becomes second nature really quickly once you start playing around with reframing and lateral chunking. One more action step's not on the slide, but I'm going to send you a little questionnaire out. If you get time, I'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out for me, because like I said at the beginning, this is the first NLP related session I've done like this. All the others have been to do with technology and training concepts. And I would quite fancy doing some more NLP stuff, but it depends if people are interested or not. And I do want to say thank you to Will and Anthony and Simon for playing along today. That's been really good of you, especially Will, because I didn't know Will very well until recently, and I just asked him once and he said yes, and then he's dived in. So hats off to Will. And
Tom. Yeah.
What I'm going to do is for those interested, I'll just hang around for a few minutes more. We're done on the material, but if you want to ask any questions or just have a gossip or a chat, I'll be here. And just thanks very much again for your attention.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Here's a question for you, Tom.
Yes.
Thinking about our partners, okay, you've made me think about how we communicate with our loved one.
Yes.
And now I'm curious about that, about whether my loved one is a big chunk or a little chunk person, or whether her style changes, and how well we communicate, you know, at the chunking level.
Yeah. It's a really good question. We all are a bit fluid, you know. We'll move, you know, along the kind of chunk level, up and down, depending on how we're feeling that day, what we're thinking, how busy